Hey, it's Ray. Oh my gosh, I'm so happy to be back vlogging. It has been, I guess, like 4 weeks since I last posted a vlog. We were doing online learning and then we went back to school, and it has just been absolutely crazy this last month. But now it is spring break. I have 2 weeks off. I'm going on holiday. So happy about it, and I'm planning on getting a lot of reading done, and particularly a lot of catch-up reading done. I need to download a few books onto my Kindle to make sure that I definitely have enough to read over the break. Okay, so I've just downloaded a few more Kindle books ready for my trip so I don't run out of reading material. Got Persuasion, which I've been listening to on audiobook, but I really want to finish it and I'm not sure the connection will be good enough to finish it on audiobook. Plus I think I'm just going to be doing more in-person reading than listening on my holiday, so I got a free version of that to listen to. Got the Pickwick Papers, which I've been meaning to get round to reading, and I also downloaded A Song of Wraiths and Ruin, which Emma on Emmy Reads really enjoyed, and it sounds not my normal thing at all usually. I don't tend to read YA fantasy, but it was a really interesting concept. It uses lots of West African myths and mythology, and I live in West Africa, so that is of interest. And I think she also said that the main character in it suffers from really awful migraine, which I also do, and so I think that'll be absolutely fascinating. I'm really excited for it, actually. I wonder whether this is a genre that perhaps I've been a bit snobbish about but could really get into. I don't know. Excited for my reading. Hi, it's Monday and I'm on holiday. I'm gonna make this a shorter kind of traveling reading vlog, and then I'll do another reading vlog for this actual week of being on holiday, because I kind of have a rule with myself that I read or at least finish one whole book every journey that I take. And on the flight I decided to tackle finishing off The Mother of the Brontës, where Maria met Patrick, which was for the Fierce Women Book Club. It was their read for January and February. Obviously it's March, kind of behind with everything. I had about 50% of that still to read, and so I finished that on the plane. I did enjoy it, and I actually increasingly enjoyed it as it went along. In the beginning I found it maybe a little bit too heavy on primary sources, some of which didn't feel super relevant to Maria's life. It was more just there as like proof that the author had done her research, or that's how it felt to me. But as the story went on, there were fewer of those, and it seemed more focused on Maria's actual life. There's a particularly strong part of it where you hear Maria's own voice. Basically, there's a bundle of her love letters which still exist, and them and this, to be honest, pretty awful religious tract that she wrote about how poor people should be grateful that they're poor because it gives them an opportunity to be closer to God. Those two things are the only written words that remain from the Brontes' mother, and her love letters to Patrick were beautiful. They were just so human. Her sort of frustration at him for not writing, her uncertainty in wanting to express herself and her affection but not wanting to go too far because they were still early on in their relationship. So unbelievably relatable. Things that we have all done in text messages or WhatsApp or whatever in our modern way of communication. They were just all there in letter format. She seemed so human, so rounded, and it was so heartbreaking to see that she had such an early and painful and traumatic death with all of her young children around her. So ultimately I really enjoyed this. It was really interesting. It completely brought to life the Brontes' mother. I still think biography is not my favourite genre. I find so often when I read biography that it just feels like what could be a fantastic and really moving and really deep story, but made shallow by the fact that you can't use the imagination to really build upon what somebody's inner world would have been like. And so I almost think I would have enjoyed the story more had it been based on the historical sources, but made fictional. From the perspective of the Fierce Women Book Club, which is looking particularly at women who have lived with chronic illness, I thought it was fascinating to see her end of life period, but I also feel a little bit like I mentioned before, like the author wasn't able to go too deeply into that. So you ended up with just quite a lot about how the mother's death affected Patrick, rather than really thinking, you know, what was going on in Maria's mind at that time as she was in enormous pain and she was dying. Was she really genuinely able to stick to all of her religious beliefs, or did she just throw them to the wind and think, like, there is no God, how can there be a God when this is happening to me? I don't know. That wasn't explored. I would have liked to have seen that explored a bit more. I still think it was a good pick. I enjoyed it. I'm glad that I read it. If you're not particularly interested in the Brontes, then I probably wouldn't bother. But if you are, then it's worth a read. So that was the novel that I finished on the plane. I then read a tiny little bit more of Childhood, Boyhood, Youth by Leo Tolstoy. That's going to be one of the ones that I tackle next on my long list. And I also finished Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. I haven't mentioned that I've been reading it in any of my videos before because I've actually been kind of reading it possibly for years. It's one that I had on Audible and I started listening to it a while back, but then didn't really get into it, sort of abandoned it, and came back to it to finish it off over the last month or so. I ultimately was not a fan. Firstly, disclaimer, I've been listening to this on audiobook, particularly like when I've been driving, I've had it on in the background, but this is not the sort of book that I think works well as an audiobook. Normally I'm all for audiobooks and I use them all the time, and I listen to fiction, non-fiction, whatever on audiobook, and it's very rare that I don't enjoy an audiobook. I'm not one of those people who really struggles with them. But this book I just found was the sort of book that I would like to have as a kind of morning reflection reader. The Meditations are a work by this guy, Marcus Aurelius. It's kind of an ancient classic, and he was writing these meditations for himself in his diary. There was no plan that they would ever be published. And he basically has this kind of stoical attitude towards life, and particularly towards death, and reflects on the importance of being a good person and of accepting life and death as it comes. And it kind of reads as a series of do this, do that, think this way, be this way, with occasional wanderings off into philosophy and quite a lot of reflection on the way that other figures from classical times play into his own vision of how to live a good life and how to die a good death. It didn't work well as an audiobook because it was just really hard to follow. I found myself tuning out constantly. There was nothing gripping about it. It would be much better to read the actual text and to underline any quotes which resonated, because there were some in there that ultimately, however, the reason I was not really a fan is that I felt like 70% of it was not a way that I would really want to live my life. Not advice that I particularly approved of. This man just came across as obsessed with death, like somebody who's clearly quite old himself. He's trying to constantly acquaint himself with the fact that death is inevitable and it's fine. Also, obviously this text is like really, really old, and so many of the moral values have changed since then. I mean, it's misogynistic, it sort of talks about slavery as if that's something completely normal, which of course it was at the time, but it's just quite interesting reading it now and realising that a lot of the things that he says are good we would no longer see as being good. My favourite bit of it was at the beginning. He goes through a list of all the people that he knows and he picks out all of the qualities that he most admires in them, and he basically kind of builds up this holistic view of a good person by picking out all of his favourite features of his friends. So, you know, I admire in my mother that she's honest, that she's faithful, that she's kind, whatever it is. I admire in my friend that he always is in good humour and he doesn't worry too much if things go wrong and he makes light of it. And I thought that was really lovely. That's an exercise that would be a nice way if you were looking at kind of trying to work out what your values are, to look around at all the people that you know in life, or maybe even celebrities or whatever, and pick out what qualities they have that you most admire, that you would like to emulate in yourself. I really liked that at the beginning and I thought it was very promising, but then from there, for me, it just drastically dropped off and went downhill. It's quite short, so I decided to just go with it and finish it. So I'm going to sign off there. I hope you enjoyed this little travelling video. I fully appreciate that a lot of people in the world are not able to travel right now. I'm extremely grateful for a holiday. I'm praying that the world gets back to normal as soon as possible. I am so happy to have the time again to make a few more videos about reading and also to read. I love it so much. I love talking in the comments with you about books, your recommendations, your thoughts. My camera just cut out, which I think is its way of telling me that it's time to wrap up now. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video.